we'll go ahead and get started. I'll turn my camera off here and get going. All right, so what's our topics today? We're going to touch on test standards that we perform on these dampers, the UL tests. We're going to look at the damper line, so all the different styles of life safety dampers. A little bit about how you install the dampers, mount them in the walls and floors, and then we'll finish up with testing and maintenance of dampers. So to start off with, there are 3 tests that we perform on life safety dampers generally. They're all UL tests. They're all 555 tests. 555 is a fire damper test, 555S is a smoke damper test, and 555C for ceiling dampers. And the way it breaks down is pure fire dampers have the 555 test. Smoke dampers, pure smoke dampers are in the 555S. Combination fire smokes get both of those tests, the fire and the smoke test, and then the ceiling radiation dampers go through 555C. So we'll talk a little bit about each test, starting off with 555, that's the fire test. And the big part of this test is the fire. We actually burn these dampers for an hour and a half or 3, depending on the rating we're going to. We have to test them both ways, vertically and horizontally, as if they were mounted in floors if we want ratings for both. So you can't just test one way and have approval for both. So we test both ways, and then immediately after the fire, we apply water from a fire hose to the face of the damper, across the damper, to see if the force of the water will open the damper up to the point where fire might pass through it. And that's the big part of the fire test. There's some more, or the UL 555 test. There are some more things that go on, particularly for the dampers that are rated to close under flow. We have a dynamic closure test, and that is where we run heated air through the damper and we close it several times to make sure that it will close. We only do that on the dampers that are rated for closure under flow. Static dampers don't have to have that. 555S is a smoke damper test. A lot of cycling involved in this test. The actuators get cycled several thousand times, 2 position, 20,000 times, modulating 100,000 times. That takes a long time, so there's a lot of that. Again, some more smaller parts of this test, but also the leakage class. Of course, we're concerned about leakage of air through a smoke damper. We're trying to stop smoke, so we test them for leakage. There's a leakage class that we rate these in. Leakage classes 1, 2, and 3. 1 being the best. 1 means that no more than 8 CFM leaks through the damper when closed per square foot under 4 inches pressure. Class 2 is 20 CFM. That's the minimum that's allowed in our codes for smoke. There is a class 3 that we really can't use for, in the States at least, for smoke. But there are some class 3 fire smoke dampers out there that you might consider for a pure fire damper in certain situations, and I'll touch on that more later. Then 555C is the ceiling damper test. Again, sort of like the regular 555 test, there's a fire test involved with this. Ceiling dampers basically assume the rating of the assembly that they're going into. So we build an assembly that we want to be part of, and we burn it. And that's the big part of that. There are also some other smaller parts of that test, but that's the big part. So that's for ceiling fire dampers. They are not interchangeable. So you cannot use a UL 555 damper in a ceiling or a 555C damper in a normal fire damper wall or floor. So I'll touch on that more later too. So all these dampers will have a label on them to show you what they are. And this label usually is on the inside of the damper, maybe on a blade or the inside of the frame. And so for this example here, we have a fire smoke damper label.
Yeah.
So, and it will show all of the ratings that this damper has. So
on your market, it does.
Okay. Anyway, thank you, Robin. All right, back to the label. So mentioned that all these UL dampers will have a label on the inside of them to show you what they are. It will tell you what the damper is and what the ratings are of that damper. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the different styles of dampers out there. And we're going to start off with fire dampers. Fire dampers are devices that stop the spread of flame across from one side to the other through ductwork in a wall or floor. Um, they are automatic, so that's one thing that we mentioned here, and that I'll bring up is that fire dampers will come with the trigger or the link or fuse link that will close it. So not the case with smoke dampers. Smoke dampers don't standardly come with a sensor for smoke, but fire dampers will. So they will automatically close whenever they get hot in the event of a fire. So three main types of fire dampers here. On the left, we have curtain style dampers. We call them curtain styles because they have a series of interlock blades at the top of them that are held together or held up by a fuse link right there. And so when that fuse link melts, those blades fall and form a steel curtain and stop the fire from spreading across. Horizontally mounted, they also there are springs to help close them, pull them over to the other side, and stop flame from spreading across. So curtain style is the most common type of fire dampers. They're in the damper world, they're kind of the lowest cost. Everything is, for the most part, is roll formed. Not a lot of human labor involved in building them, so the cost is somewhat low. But they are also somewhat limited in size and airflow. So multi-blade dampers in the middle here, that's another style. Now, these are basically kind of like normal air dampers with center pivot blades and axles and linkage and things to operate the blades. And so, as you can imagine, you look at that and you can say, well, that's got to be a stronger damper, and it is. These typically, the multi-blades will go larger sizes, somewhat larger, not a great deal larger, but they will go some bigger and sometimes higher velocities, sometimes higher pressures. So in the case, if you have a duct that is too large for a curtain damper, you might be able to get by with one damper with a multi-blade style damper. And then there's also what we call true round dampers. So that's where the damper frame is actually round. Now we can do a squared around on almost anything, but these dampers, the frame is actually round itself. All of these are fuse link dampers, so they all have a melting fuse link that melts and will trigger the damper to close. Fire dampers are rated for a couple of different things. One of them is airflow, and the other is time. So airflow, there are dampers that are designed to close with airflow moving through them, and those will close under at least 2,000 feet per minute, 4 inches pressure. And this rating applies to fire dampers and also to fire smoke and smoke dampers. All fire smoke and smoke dampers are rated to close under flow. Static dampers are dampers that are designed to close without any air moving through them. So to use them, your system must have provisions to shut down the fans, shut down the air handlers, etc. So if you have that, you might be able to use a static damper. Static dampers sometimes cost a little bit less, usually cost a little bit less. But the main difference is really in vertical mount dampers. The dynamic dampers that close under flow will often use springs, and it's kind of hard to see, I know, in this photograph, but there is a ribbon spring right here, stainless steel ribbon spring that connects to the bottom of the frame and to the first blade in the blade package, and there's one on this side too that you can't see. So when that fuse link melts, that snaps that damper down and closes it. Static dampers vertically do not use springs, so it'll look like this. There will be nothing there. Now, not all dampers that are rated for flow will have these big ribbon springs. Some companies will use, on small sizes, a little very small spring in the very top of the blades. But when they get very large, then they'll have these ribbon springs. Horizontal mount all use springs. So whether they're rated for flow or they're static, they will all use springs because that's what closes them. And then time-wise, fire dampers are rated for either an hour and a half or 3. Generally, all of the large majority of the dampers we build are hour and a half rated, but we do make a lot of 3-hour dampers too. So about the ratings, hour and a half, you might think, well, that's kind of a weird time or weird rating. And you might think, well, if I have something, an assembly greater than that, I need to use a 3-hour damper, but that's not the case. So the code says anything less than 3, rated for less than 3, you use an hour and a half damper. So for example, if you have a 2-hour wall, you can use, or you do use, an hour and a half rated damper. With these curtain dampers, we run into what we call the blade package, and that is the interlock blades at the top of the damper, like we have here. And now these photographs here, these are all small dampers. They're probably 8x8 or 10x10. They're very small. So the blade package is not very much. It's maybe 1.5 inches or so. But these dampers can get much larger, much taller. And then when they do that, that blade package becomes several inches in height. And that's blocking your airflow on your duct. So we've developed different frame types that can kind of help reduce the effect of the blade package on the airflow through it. So an A-type frame is a type that you connect the duct to the entire outside of the damper, perimeter of the damper. So everything is in the airstream. Blade package, frame, legs, etc. It's all in the airstream. The B-type has a little hood or flange on the top of it that brings a top duct connection just beneath the blade package. And so it essentially gets the blade package out of the airstream. And then the C-type comes in on all 4 sides. So not only does it get the blade package out of the airstream, but it also gets the frames. The frame heights are not all that much, but they do block a little bit of airflow. So now we show a round on this C-type, but we can do squares and rectangles too with the C-type. One thing to remember though with the B's and the C's is that the opening for the damper must be larger than the duct, and we run into that sometimes where the wall is cut for the duct size, but they're going to use B style dampers, so the dampers are taller. So just remember that our cut sheets for our models will show you what those heights are, so you can plan for that. So here's an example of where I'm going to show you a couple of Pottorff models, fire damper models, to kind of give you an idea of what's available out there. These are just 2 of many fire dampers. We have a lot of different fire damper models. These are just two of them. The VFD 10D here on the left, that's probably our biggest selling curtain style fire damper. We have a VFD 10 that's a static, and the VFD 10D is rated for airflow up to we can do up to 4,000 feet per minute, 4 inches pressure. We have a 304 stainless option for it, so we can do that, and we do 120 by 72 vertically with that damper. And then for a example of a multi-blade fire damper, we have the FD150 here, which is our airfoil blade multi-blade fire damper, also rated for flow up to 4,006 inches pressure. 304 stainless is an option, and 128 by 96 vertically. So this is a little bit larger than a curtain damper, so it might be an option for you if you have a size larger than what you can do with a curtain style. Also mention that most fire dampers and fire smoke dampers need a sleeve, and the point of that is so that if something falls in the ductwork or in some way breaks the duct away, and most of these are connected to the sleeve with a breakaway connection, the sleeve will remain in the wall or floor with the damper in it and protect the opening from the fire. So the sleeves can be provided by us. We can install the sleeves in our factory before we ship it. That's very common, or the contractor can provide the sleeves too. We give them instructions about how to do that on our sheets on our website. So either way, but just know that fire dampers and fire smokes typically need to be sleeved. Smoke dampers are devices that stop the spread of smoke. As I mentioned before, they're rated for leakage classes. In the States, we can use Class 1 or Class 2. The code doesn't really say you have to use Class 1 here or Class 2 there. Leaves it up to you, but kind of think, well, the most critical places is probably where you want to use Class 1, like hospitals, schools, stairwells, etc. are all places where you might think about using a Class 1 rated damper. They are rated for 250 or 350F. You would want to use a 350 rated damper, certainly if the damper is in a system that's going to be where the damper is going to be used during the fire to create pressure zones and manage smoke. You would want the higher rating for that. And then all smoke dampers are rated for airflow. There are no static smoke dampers. They're all rated for at least 2,000 feet per minute, 4-inch pressure. The actuators on smoke dampers and fire smoke dampers have to be provided from the factory. We have to mount them on the damper. We cannot provide these dampers without them and have the contractor put them on out in the field. So they have to come with it. Most smoke dampers are fail closed. That's kind of the way that they started out and the way that most of them are, but there are some fail open options. If you have, say an example where you want to move smoke out, you want to purge smoke in the event of a fire, you can have fail open, but it may affect the number of actuators on the damper. It may have to have more to be fail open. And then the combination fire smoke combines, of course, the fire and the smoke damper together. So it's leakage class rated, it's temperature rated, it's rated for airflow. The actuators are mounted on them at the factory. And I'll mention here, I think I touched on it before, but Class 3 fire smoke. Now, codes, well, you must use at least a Class 2 rated damper here in the States. But a fire smoke damper, as soon as you hook it up to power or hook air up to it, it's a fire damper. And you don't ever have to connect it to anything to do with smoke. It can be used as a pure fire damper. And these FSD 143s can go up to 144 by 96 vertically. So they go quite large. It's the largest fire damper that we offer. And that's typically going to be the case with a fire smoke damper is typically going to be larger than most fire dampers. So in situations where you've got very large sizes or where your damper will be in a place where it's going to be very hard to get to it after it's put in to maintain, you might consider using a fire smoke damper. The codes now allow motorized dampers with blade position switches to be remotely tested or cycled, which is required now. So it's another option or another reason why you might think of that. So that's just throwing that out there. Food for thought for you there. Key fire smoke damper models, again, a couple of examples from our line. FSD 142, that's a triple V groove damper, Class 2, leakage rated, 304 stainless option for that, and 144 by 96 vertically. And then the FSD 151 is our airfoil blade damper. And we have examples of the two different blades here on the side. It's a Class 1 leakage. Airfoil blade dampers are typically going to be Class 1 because the double skin is a tighter sealing blade. It's also generally a stronger blade, so a lot of times you can handle higher velocities and pressures with an airfoil. And we do that. We go up to 8 inches pressure with the FSC 151. 304 stainless is optional. Modulating and vertical blade options are also available with this model. Now that's not on all fire smokes. Only certain models will have those options, but this model does have that. Modulating allows you with a signal in to manage the blade position and basically use your fire smoke damper like a balancing damper until there's a fire, and then that part is overridden and it becomes full closed generally in the event of a fire. So 128 by 96 max size with the FSC 151. Sealing dampers. So this could be a whole other talk on itself. This is a lengthy a lengthy product line, and it's a little bit tricky on how to apply these, but we'll hit the very high points here. Sealing dampers do two things. They protect a floor sealing assembly or roof sealing assembly from both fire and from heat. So that's a big difference. A UL 555 fire damper protects from fire but does not protect from heat, but a sealing damper also protects from heat. So that's why it's one of the reasons why you can't use a normal 555 fire damper in a ceiling. And this is an example of what we're talking about. floor ceiling assembly. Imagine this being a wood structure. Generally, these are most often used in wood structures. So you'll have a wood truss, maybe assembly here, and when you penetrate just the lower membrane of this assembly, the ceiling part, that's where you use a ceiling fire damper. You don't use it in the floor. If you were going all the way through this assembly with, say, a duct or a shaft, you would not use a ceiling fire damper. It might be a 555 damper, might be a fire smoke if it's a shaft, but not a ceiling fire damper. But if you're just going through this lower part here, that's where you use a ceiling fire damper. And that damper is protecting not only from fire, but also from heat that radiates up. Radiation damper is another name that is commonly used for these, and that's why.
Hey, James, we have a quick question from Matthew. Does the modulating type damper remember its balancing position after a fire?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that one. We will have to find that out, and we will get back to Matthew on it.
Yeah, I'll make a note of it.
Okay, thank you. So these ceiling fire dampers, they basically, unlike a normal fire damper, they assume the rating of the assembly that they're going into. So what we do basically is they're listed in the UL listed assembly. So for example, L521 is a listing for a wood truss system that is a UL listed assembly. To find that, you can go to UL's website. UL has a search called Product IQ that is free to use, and you can go there to UL's website and get on that. And if you know the listing number of the assembly, you can type that in, and it will bring up a PDF of the listing. And in that PDF, you will see what that assembly looks like, what it's made of, and what dampers, if any, are allowed. Now, sometimes you'll pull these up and it'll be an assembly that dampers are not allowed in, and that could be a problem. But generally, if dampers are allowed, it will specifically tell you what models, what brands are in it. So we encourage you, number one, find out what the assembly number is. Sometimes that's not easy to do, but you want to do that, and then check your listing on UL to make sure the dampers that you want to use is in that. Okay, so what activates these dampers? Typically, fire dampers will have a sensor or a link. Pure fire dampers will have a melting fuse link, generally, that melts and allows the blades to fall in a curtain damper or be pulled closed, or on a multi-blade damper, they'll have a jack shaft that with a spring wound on it that will snap the damper closed. Fire smoke dampers, motorized dampers will typically, electrically motorized dampers will have a heat sensor that will sense the heat and break the circuit to the motor once heat is sensed, and the motors have springs inside of them that close the damper. So basically, fire dampers, fire smoke dampers don't need any outside help to make them work. They will work on their own. Smoke dampers are a little different story. Smoke dampers do not standardly come with a sensor to sense smoke. They typically will need help from the system outside of it to close it. Now, smoke detectors are available. We can provide them with the dampers in a sleeve, and we have flow types and no flow types available. But it's not standard. It's an option, and generally, in the big total number of dampers we build, we supply a fairly small amount of them with these. Typically, they're not with these. A lot of times, a different trade will handle the smoke system, so we don't have it. But it is available. It is an option. You do have to specify it and order it. Actuators, I touched on that a little bit before. Actuators on smoke dampers and fire smoke dampers have to be provided from the factory. They can be externally mounted so that they're out of the air stream like we have in the top picture, or they can be internally mounted so that they are in the airstream. There are size limitations on how small we can go with an internally mounted motor, but there are options. Generally, these are spring return, two-position spring return, so they're full open, full closed. 24, 124, 24 and 120 volt are very common. Some will go up to 230. Modulating is an option for some models, so you can manage the position of the blade with a signal in. Pneumatic is also available still. That's sort of something that we don't sell a lot of right now. Used to be more common back in the day, but fewer and fewer, mostly retrofits now. But I will mention that pneumatics, the volume of that is small enough, or of those are small enough that we don't keep a lot of those on hand. So it might affect your lead time a little bit if you go with that style. Okay, now we're going to get into a little bit about how you install life safety dampers, and just again, kind of touching on the very high points. The first thing I'll mention is that you always want to go to the sheets, the installation sheets for the precise models that you're using, and we get asked from time to time, what's a good general drawing I can show, detail I can show on my drawings of how to mount a fire damper that would apply to all? And the answer is there is none. A lot of us are very similar in how you mount these, but they're not exactly the same. So you want to follow the exact details of the models that you're using. So getting it, and so we provide these with all these dampers. So every order there will be a physical set of these that ship out with the damper, and then if they are lost for some reason, they're very, very easily found on our website. Now I will show you in a few slides where to find those at. So starting off with smoke dampers. Smoke dampers are a little easier because there's fewer rules with them. For example, they don't have to be in the wall. They don't have to be sleeved. They can just be mounted in a duct, etc. They can be up to 24 inches outside of the barrier. You just can't have anything coming out of the duct in between the barrier and the damper. There are some rules about mounting the damper frame into the duct, and maybe some sealing involved, but that's it. So they're pretty simple. Fire dampers, they're trickier. There's more rules with them. Starting off, typically they have to be in the wall, in the plane of the wall or the floor that they're mounted in. So when we're showing a curtain style damper here, when that fuse link melts and that curtain falls, that curtain must be within the plane of the wall or floor. Now we show it centered here. It doesn't have to be centered. It could be more to one side or the other, but it has to be in the plane. That's probably 90% of the fire dampers that you see. There are out of partition dampers available, and some call them out of the wall dampers, where they can be outside, and we'll touch on those too, but generally that's the case. They have to be within the barrier.
Hey, James, I have another question.
Yeah.
This is from Lucas. I understand that fire dampers do not require sensors or power because of the fusible link. However, are they required to have sensors to have them monitored by the fire alarm system?
No, they are not. They are not. Now, we do offer a blade position switch that would trigger when a curtain damper is closed. We do have that, but it's not necessarily required. So, and we have blade position switches also for the fire smoke dampers too. And I think I have a slide on that, so I'll touch on that too. Okay, so angles are typically used to mount these fire smoke dampers. They do two things. They hold them in place on the wall or the floor, but they also seal off or safe off the gap in between the damper and the opening. There has to be a little bit of gap there. These dampers, when they get hot, they have to be allowed to expand, but not bind up so they wouldn't close. So there's a little bit of gap, at least an 1/8 inch around them. So the angles help safe off that space, and then they also hold the damper in place. Now, 1.5-hour rated dampers up to a certain size, a pretty good size, can be mounted with angles on one side of the barrier only. They don't have to have them on both sides. Both sides is an option. You can put them on both sides, certainly, but you don't have to. And that's all shown in the sheets that come with the dampers. There are some size limits. They're only for 1.5 hours, but that is an option. Getting your inspectors to accept that may be another challenge for you, because sometimes they won't accept angles on one side, but that is allowed in certain cases. So I mentioned there are out of partition dampers where the damper can be out of the barrier. This is an example here. We call these OPs, and the sheet here is our installation sheet for some of our fire smoke models, the V-groove and the airfoils. And these can be up to 12 inches outside of the barrier. And how we do this is the sleeve is wrapped in a fire and heat resistant blanket to protect it from the heat. And that allows it to be outside. There are some size limitations, though, with these. That's the main thing to keep in mind, is that these don't get very big, generally about 3 foot square. It'd be about as big as they usually get. Some might get a little bit larger, but we do at least have that size. So it could be a solution for you if you have a problem on a job where you just can't get the damper inside the barrier. You might consider an OP style damper. Also, sort of the same vein, another out of partition style damper is our side panel dampers, and these are dampers that are designed specifically for use in shafts and rated shafts. Knowing that it's very difficult or impossible to get to the backside of the damper, it's installed in a shaft. These dampers are provided with a front flange. You slide them in from the front, and then you run screws or rivets through the sleeve into the shaft wall framing, and that's what holds them in. You don't have to get to the backside to put anything on the back of them. The actuators are here in the front, so you can get right to them. If you terminate here at the damper, you can install a grill and put that there too. So very, very nice option for you for shafts. Again, sort of limited on sizes. They'll go a little bit larger than an OP, but not much. But they are, but not most of the time. These openings are not huge to begin with, so they work fine. True round dampers. These are dampers where the frame itself is round, and we make these in fire smoke dampers. We do 6-inch to 24-inch. Sometimes we're asked, well, do I have to cut a round hole for these in my wall? No, you can do a square hole. Our mounting plate is a square plate, so square hole works fine. But very, very nice option if you're using spiral. Now, sometimes we're asked, do I have to seal the angles and the fasteners and such on the damper for the UL listing? And the answer is no. You don't have to do that. You can do that. You have to use the right sealants. There's only certain sealants that you can use. But if you're concerned about leakage out of the duct through the screw heads or around the angles, you can seal all of that with the proper sealant. So that is an option. Okay, lastly, we're going to look at testing and maintenance for life safety dampers. And you can't install these dampers and leave them forever, or you're not supposed to at least, and never exercise them or check them out. And we can see here's some examples, some photographs of projects or dampers out in buildings that have been in place for a few years. And there's all kinds of things that can happen to a damper. None of these are probably going to work the right way, the way that they are. So the IBC refers to NFPA for maintenance and testing of dampers, NFPA 80 for fire dampers and 105 for smoke and fire smoke dampers. So what 80 says is that there's a series of tests to perform on these life safety dampers to make sure they're working correctly. There's one right after you put it in to make sure everything is in place and everything is working. Acceptance testing happens generally whenever the system is cranked up and turned on, and it's often when the building is turned over. That's the acceptance testing. After that, 1 year after the acceptance testing, and then after that, every 4 to 6 years. 4 years for normal commercial buildings, 6 years for healthcare. Healthcare groups lobby to get a little bit longer cycle there so that people didn't have to shut down their systems as often and people get in their ceiling tiles and stuff. So they go 6 years. But what that means is that the building owners, are supposed to cycle these dampers, and in the case of a fire damper, they have to close it and reopen it every so often. With fire dampers, pure fire dampers, that means you have to get to the damper. And there's no way to close it without removing the fuse link and letting it close and then reopening it and reinstalling the fuse link. That's the only way to do it. And you can imagine on a healthcare facility, for example, that's got thousands of, or at least hundreds of fire dampers. That's a big job. It's a big task. NFPA in 2019 revised the language of the standards to allow remote testing of motorized dampers with blade position switches, so that you can remotely test, say, a fire smoke damper that has an actuator and has blade position switches to indicate when the blades are closed and reopened. So that's a big change. So that allows a building owner now to maintain these without actually having to get to the dampers. The language says you have to witness the first remote test. So the first time you trigger the damper remotely, you have to see it, make sure it's working. After that, you don't have to see it again. So huge thing. Another reason why you might consider a motorized damper in lieu of a pure fire damper. So we offer some options to make it easier to maintain and test these dampers. Remote control panels, or for us, RCPs, is one way to do it. These combined with the blade position switch will allow you to close the damper with just flicking a switch, or the toggle switch here. In this case, this is our RCP1 panel that has lights, red and green lights, to show you when the blades are open and closed. These are connected into our PI50 blade position switch, and so you can see very easily when the blades are open and closed. These are options. These are not standard. These you need to specify and order these to get these, but they are optional, and it makes it easier for the person or the group testing these to actually do that. And they don't have to be on the damper. This one is kind of shown on a damper, but they could be remotely mounted too. The PI50 blade position switch is a switch that's built into the frame of the damper that makes whenever the blades are open and when they're closed. So it will send a dry contact signal out that will tell you when the blades are open and closed. And then the RCP remote control panels are the panels that have the switches that allow you to test. This RCP1M has basically, it's what we call a damper test switch. It's basically a kill switch. It's a spring-loaded button. As long as you hold that button in, it breaks the power of the motor and lets the motor spring the damper closed. When you release the button, the power resumes and the damper opens. It can be provided with lights connected to the PI50 that will show you when the blades are open and closed, or it can just be the box with the switch. But all of these are optional. Again, not standard equipment, but they are options. A couple things I'll mention here on our website. These are tools that help you select products and find the products that you need very fast. One of them is a cross-reference. This is on, these both are on Pottorff.com. So let's say you're familiar with another brand of damper. Let's say, for example, in this example, we have Ruskin. You can select Ruskin from the drop-down, and you can select the model, the Ruskin model. In this case, we're looking at the FSD 60, and the cross-reference will return our equivalent model to that. So very fast way for you to cross-reference and find the correct Pottorff model in a spec. Another nice tool we have is the quick reference. And the quick reference is models grouped by family together, and so that you can get to them very fast. And then, like, for example, we're looking at the fire smoke damper page here. This is just the top part of it. This goes on many rows down. We have a lot of different fire smoke dampers, but it will show you the ratings of the dampers, the sizes they'll go up to, velocities, pressures, and then all the attachments. There's links to those over here on the right side. And you can sort by the column type. So you could pick, if you just wanted to look at class 1 leakage rated dampers, you could click on the leakage class there, and it would bring all of the class 1 dampers to the top. So another really nice feature, nice tool for you to use to help you get to the right damper. So lastly, just a couple of things more. On-time delivery, we feel that we have the shortest lead times, standard lead times in the business. And we also have an excellent quick ship program where you can get products in 7 days, 3 days, and even next day. All of our products are made in the USA by union laborers, so we're an all U.S. company. We are compliant with all of the Buy American, Build American, all those things that you see sometimes on jobs now. We have a customer service team that is top notch. We have a full 5-year product warranty on all of our products. We already talked about the cross-reference a little bit. One thing I'll mention for louvers is we have a louver selection program on Pottorff.com called LIST, L-I-S-T, and this is a picture of the screen right there. This program will not only help you select louvers based on the louver type and the material, blade style, etc., but you can also size the louvers based on your airflow. You can create a schedule of all of your louvers, and you can download a file if you're, say, a design build group and you've sized some louvers for a project and you want a price for them. You can export a file to your Pottorff rep. He can plug it into his specs program and price it up for you. So it's a cool feature, a cool louver selection tool that we encourage you to use. I think it's the best one out there, and we encourage you to check that out. So with that ends my my discussion on life safety damp.
We have left our 2 emails up there in the contacts. If you have any questions at a later date, just let us know and we'll get them answered very quickly. Thank you so much, James, for that excellent webinar.
You're welcome, Robin. Thank you.